Hello, my name is Joshua Reese, and I'll be briefing you on the Middle East post 9/11. The Middle East post 9/11 has played host to various areas and actors of concern. The main threats have shifted over time, however, from Osama bin Laden and Al Qaeda to currently the Islamic State or ISIL, as it attempts to destabilize various states across the Middle East. I'm going to be discussing the initial response to 9/11's terrorist attacks. Then I'm going to discuss the fluctuating state and territorial borders within the Middle East region. Then I'm going to discuss the Department of Defense strategy for the Middle East, specifically combating ISIL. So let's highlight some items that happened during the first 100 days following 9/11. The president at the time, George W. Bush, and Congress approved a $20 billion defense fund for homeland defense in October. They also enacted new airline security standards. Um, 93 anti-terrorism task forces were created, one each for every U.S. attorney office. President Bush also started what became called the Globalized War on Terrorism. He met with leaders from 51 different countries and was able to secure military support from 136 countries. Also, NATO, OAS, and the ANZUS invoked their treaty obligations to support U.S. military operations. Briefly, let's look at some financial figures. Uh, the total projected financial spending through the fiscal year of 2018 uh, is over $2 trillion US dollars. The costliest year to date has been 2008. We spent over 235 billion US dollars. Now let's look at some of the fluctuating borders in the Middle East. Libya is now divided into four different distinct regions, one of which being the internationally recognized government controlled region. There are also three other regions in the country controlled by separate militia alliances. Within those militia controlled areas, we see some portions that are controlled by the Islamic State as well as Al Qaeda. In Yemen, mainly thanks to the civil war in 2014, there are again four distinct zones, one of which is controlled by the internationally recognized government and has a lot of support from the Saudis. You also see a state controlled by the Islamic State, or a zone, I should say, a zone controlled by Al Qaeda, and then a Houthi rebel zone. In Syria, again, we see it split into three regions now. One, of course, being controlled by the Islamic State. Another is controlled by the Kurds in Syria. And then you have the remnants of Assad's regime controlling the last area. And also, let's look at Iraq. There are four distinct areas there. There's still an Islamic State presence, even though they're in the state of decline due to some of the extreme military pressure that they're facing. You also see areas controlled by Shiite Arabs and Sunni Arabs. And then there is also a Kurdistan regional government controlled area. Lastly, let's look at the current defense strategy for the Middle East and specifically towards combating ISIL. Of course, the main objective is to contain the spread of ISIL and defeat them. In order to do this, the U.S. Department of Defense has used strike aircraft. They've equipped Syrian Arab forces, and they've also equipped some forces along the Jordanian border. They've concentrated efforts on isolating ISIL's communication methods between its power centers, its centers of command, and we've also expanded combat domains to include those of cyber and space. The Department of Defense has trained over 20,000 Iraqi security forces and has provided 6 full brigade sets of equipment. There are concerns over underfunding the war effort against ISIL. However, given the current proposed defense spending by the Trump administration, this might not actually be the case. Moving forward, they hope to stabilize already secured areas of Iraq and continue to provide support. Just to recap, I discussed the initial response to the terrorist attacks of 9/11. I discussed the fluctuating territorial zones of the Middle East. and I discussed the defense strategy against ISIL in the Middle East. My name is Joshua Reese, and I thank you very much for your time.